Still to this day, if you type in allyship, spell check comes up. And last year, allyship was the word of the year for dictionary.com. So let me start by reading what dictionary.com says, and then I'll tell you how I define it.
Hi, this is Frank Schaeffer, and you are watching and/or listening to In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer, which is a podcast and interview show, I guess you could call it. It is live on Facebook as we speak, and of course recorded, and then goes on all our various platforms, including YouTube, Facebook again, and all the places our podcast can be seen or heard. So today, my guest is Kim Graham-Lee, and she is CEO of Integrating Women Leaders Foundation. And I'm looking at a screen here that I can read without putting my glasses on and feeling old. So I'm going to do that again. Integrating Women Leaders Foundation, spearheading the state of allyship, and that part I get, in action, benchmark study with the WBC. So I've jammed a lot of stuff together. So first of all, Kim, welcome. But let me just say that I get the allyship bit. It's one reason I'm part of the WBC, the Women's Business Collaborative, because I've been looking for ways to have a little bit of allyship myself, be an ally in some of these fights that you're in and that the WBC represents. And so we have a little over 50% of all our guests are women. And I'd say of that group, half are drawn from the WBC. And so we're trying to get with your program. So first of all, let me ask you to describe a little bit about this whole benchmark study, what it means, why you're doing it, and then we'll get into who you are and other stuff. But let's just start with this study. What's it about?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Frank, for having me today and your involvement with the WBC. I'm part of that 50% that's tied to the WBC, all right? I'm also a partner. The State of Allyship-In-Action research effort is a benchmark study. There has not been research like this done before, where we're really trying to get a baseline picture from the perception of men and women of what's happening in organizations that we're calling it corporate America as it relates to allyship. Lean In McKinsey report that I have great respect for, the Women in the Workplace, they have released some information around allyship, but this is a deeper study and a broader study, and even in terms of who's participating in it. So we're very excited. When you learn a little bit more about my background, you'll know why I'm super excited about doing research. But we really hope that this effort will be educational and also provide some of the metrics to help show that there is a gap and we need to take action. And this is really what, allyship is all about. So,
well, let's back up a minute, because I should have started with this, and I apologize. I kind of jumped the gun. Let's define, for folks who are listening to this podcast or watching, your definition of allyship and why it's needed. What are we talking about here?
Well, I'm going to, here's an interesting story, Frank. I started this journey of allyship myself personally in my role at IWL 5 years ago. And still to this day, if you type in allyship, spell check comes up. And last year, allyship was the word of the year for dictionary.com. So let me start by reading what dictionary.com says, and then I'll tell you how I define it as a practitioner and working with a lot of men and women over the last 5+ years on allyship. So here's dictionary.com's definition. The status or role of a person who advocates and actively works for the inclusion of a marginalized or politicized group in all areas of society, not as a member of that group, but in solidarity with its struggle and point of view and under its leadership. So it's in dictionary.com now, still not being, still comes up on spell check. But in the work that I've done with a lot of men, including men globally, to help them on their journeys of allyship, I define it very simply as when a man will advocate for a woman even when she's not in the room. So that's what allyship is, and further extend that to other areas where you can be an ally to other marginalized or underrepresented groups. But that's where we start, that someone will step up and support someone even when they're not in the room.
Yeah, I love that definition. And of course, there's such truth to that. It applies to all human relationships. I mean, that's how you know who your real friends are. It's what you hear,
right?
What was said about you when you weren't in the room. I mean, isn't that just such a true thing? So that's wonderful. Let me back up a little further here and just talk about you for a minute. You know, on this podcast, I always try to start with the personal, because that's where we all come from. You know, we all have these official things we do. Officially, I'm a writer. Unofficially, I'm a grandfather of 5 grandchildren, and I do full-time childcare for 3 of them and have for 13 years. That's what I do. So I don't mean my wife does it and I help out. I mean, I'll be doing Nora's school pickup today. I've already got food picked out. I'm going to cook for her. And this is year 13 of doing this. So that's awesome. What I do. That's who I am. If you want to back up further, Jeannie and I have been married 52 years, and I got her pregnant when we were 17 and 18. We've been together ever since. I don't even know who those kids were, but I make no pretense that my life has been about anything except a journey as a human being. And then I've written some books, and a couple have been bestsellers, and I speak and so on. So now I'm saying all that about me, even though that's the most I'm going to talk here for the rest of this conversation, to kind of set you up and say, okay, great, you're doing all this stuff, and we're going to talk about all of it, and it's all very important. But bottom line, you know, who is Kim Graham Lee? Where did she come from? What were her parents like? What does she care about? And what was your background? Because you can't understand me unless you know about my background. I bet I can't understand you unless I know where you were a child and who your mom was and your father and your dad and good and bad things. So let's talk personally for a while, and then we'll get back to the big stuff.
Sure. Well, I am very fortunate, Frank. I still have my parents. In fact, I moved them to Indianapolis, where I have lived the last 42 years, from Atlanta during COVID. They have had some health issues, and I am the fortunate child that got to be the one that got them. And in connection to my parents, they've been incredibly supportive. And in fact, I would say my father was my first male ally. He was a very successful executive with Kimberly-Clark Corporation. I was not named after the company, even though I was the oldest. They were expecting me when he took the job, but they keep telling me that I was not named for the company. But I was very inspired by both of my parents. My father is a successful business person who grew up on a small farm town in Iowa and then led all of manufacturing for Kimberly-Clark by the end of his career, but knew everybody's name when he would walk into any plant manufacturing mill, whether it was Neenah, Wisconsin or Rouen, France. He knew everybody's name. And then my mother was one of my biggest cheerleaders too. In fact, one of my books that's in my head might be called "That's My Girl, Keep It Up." You know, things were different in her generation, and she was one of my strongest supporters in terms of career and accomplishments. And I feel very, very blessed that I have both of my parents. So I see your book title there. I'm incredibly proud of the parent I am and grandparent.
Talk about when you say parent, who are we talking about?
I am talking about my son, Brent, who is 34, and he works for Lilly Endowment, the second largest foundation in the world. And in fact, I know today he has a really important set of meetings he's been organizing. So I've been thinking good thoughts about him. And he is a CPA by background and did that for 6 years and was recruited to work with all the community foundations in the state of Indiana. And Lilly Endowment does so much good all over the globe. Sure. Not just our state, but also around the globe. So incredibly proud of him. And my daughter, I say she is my hero. She is 31 and moved from Indiana to West Virginia a year ago. My heart still breaks because she took my grandson, Griffin, who's 3, granddaughter, Adrian, she's turning 2 on April 18th, but I will be there for the birthday. And we just had Gabe in December. So a new grandson as of December. And she works for a cybersecurity company and has done remote work really, it had nothing to do with COVID. She leads a virtual team supporting the sales team for this cybersecurity company. And they have been my pride and joy. And now I have grandbabies that you know what it's like, Frank.
Yes, I do.
And no, I'm inspired by you sharing what you did about, the role you play. And I try to get to West Virginia as often as I can. And Brent just got married. So I hope there will be some Indianapolis. I'm sure he'll see this. I hope there will be some Indianapolis grandbabies, at least in a few years.
Well, send Brent my book and tell him to get on with it.
I will do.
So you've done the
Brent
falling in
and
love
Ally.
part, now have the children.
Yeah,
But anyway,
that's right.
yeah. So talk about the grandparent role for a little bit in terms of how it's changed the way you see life. I'm not asking for big philosophical stuff, but just what comes to mind, because for me, I can mark 2 or 3 events in my life where you're saying, yeah, this was the moment. Watching my first child be born. I mean, cliche as that is, that was the moment. First time I kissed Jeannie when we were kids together, that was the moment. And then, the other big one is first time a grandchild was placed in my arms.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this is the moment.
Wow. Thank you so much for asking that question. I will tell you that in some ways that was even more impactful for me than having children, especially as it relates to, I see your Save the Planet there.
Mm-hmm.
I think so much more about the future, given the fact that for a lot of their life, I won't be here. Yeah. And what will the world be like when they're growing up? And I'll share something else very personal. Gabe, who was just born in December, there were no problems with the pregnancy. My daughter always delivered early, so he came about a week and a half early, but we didn't know that he came with some special needs. And we're still, getting our arms wrapped around, exactly what, his condition is. There's several things that are going on with him, but he already is a special blessing and will be a special, will be surrounded by lots of special love. And I do think about, this future that my grandbabies will have. It matters a lot more to me what the future looks like and what is happening on the earth. And, and I think about Gabe, and this ties even to the allyship. I think he's going to have an extra backpack to carry, is how I refer to it. And I really, truly pray that there will be a lot of kindness to him as he grows. And I know he's going to be a special blessing. And so anyway, thank you. I can't wait to see him. I haven't seen him for like 2 months, and Grammy's going to be back there in a couple weeks, and I can't wait to hold them all.
and this, your daughter, I don't want to lose track here. She has 3 children.
She has 3.
And
she
Gabe
has
is
3.
The little one.
He's the newest, 3.5 months. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and they're the ones who just moved.
They did just move. Would you call her?
Yes.
Yeah, my son-in-law had a great job opportunity, and her job was remote. And I'm so proud of them. In fact, I just texted them. It was a week ago that they moved, and I'm so proud of really their unity as a couple to strike out and take this opportunity. Their plan is to come back eventually, but I'm so proud of them as a couple, and I'm so proud of them as parents. And they're just amazing people. My son and his wife are as well. I'm very, very blessed. I did end a marriage 10 years ago, which was very difficult. That'll be a chapter in the book I haven't written yet. And after 30 years of marriage, and I'm in a wonderful relationship now. So anyway. Yeah, yes, falling in love is a good thing too.
That's a big transition for you. Yes. And that was, you were saying 10 years ago?
Yeah, and I had been married 30 years.
So yes. Where's your head at on that now? Is the ringing out of your ears, or are you still sort of living that a little bit, or have you been really move on?
Oh, I think moved on. I mean, I think even that happened before. It's a journey, and I will say there are still occasional moments of grief that'll hit you. I don't think I think everyone's desire is to be married to the parent of your children. Sure. And things happen, and no question that it was the right decision for all of us, but you move on and just celebrate every day. And I do believe you can still be a family and not necessarily be married. But
Yes.
anyway,
Yeah.
it was not what I scripted for my life. So it was a bit of a shocker, but it was over many years even coming to that decision. And then, you know, there is a lot of healing after, and then there are these moments of grief on anything that
Absolutely.
but no, it was not the life I scripted. When I look at my parents that will be celebrating 65 years of marriage in June. So, yeah.
Well, you know, Jeannie and I were fortunate in the sense that when you meet somebody and you're 17 and 18, you know, without in any way trivializing decisions, it's really the luck of the draw.
Yeah.
In the sense that, you know, what do you know? You know, I think one of the crazy things people do now, I'm getting totally off topic. We're just talking over a couple.
I love this, right? We can...
One of the crazy things I've learned as life goes on is that, I don't know how to put this right. You know, people say, well, I'm waiting to get married till I really know somebody, and or I'm planning out how to have kids. One thing I've discovered, I'm going to be 70 in August, and looking back, here's something I really know. I really know that the relationships themselves change us. So the person you think you're going to start a business with, have a baby with, get married to, travel around the world with, the very fact you're together, it's like one of those quantum experiments. The fact you're actually together changes them. So this crazy idea that, you know, when I have the right job, when I have the right career, when I'm old enough, when I know enough, when I've been with someone long enough, when we've lived together long enough, you know, and or on the childcare front, of course, you really still don't know anything. So that,
No.
You know, my wife was saying this the other day because we had our babies so young. She was laughing and saying, you know, I have all my friends who waited much longer, but she said they could be 40 years old. They're still a young mom. In other words, they don't know, all that waiting didn't teach you anything about the thing you're doing because you had to be there. I mean, does that ring a bell with you on terms of your life of experience? Like you're saying, this isn't the script I wrote. Well, who did?
Right. Absolutely. And I think what I've really grown to appreciate is the power of acceptance. Like this is what it is.
Yeah.
And then usually I'm pretty good at this. The other part of it is, and what can I be grateful for? Acceptance and gratitude, I think, helps you move forward. Because you just don't know.
No.
And you do the best you can. And if you saw my bio, I think I have at the bottom of it is that every day is a gift. And I really do try and look at it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's funny what in life teaches us things, because again, we have this sort of official side of career or academic credentials or money in the bank or title or whatever. But my daughter, is a CEO, my 50 plus year old daughter, who's a CEO of a company in New York, was telling me the other day, you know, Dad, from now on, when I write a CV or, you know, a bio, I put right at the top something I never used to mention as a woman in business. I used to try to avoid too many mentions of the family because nobody wanted to hear it. She said, now, when I'm asked a question in a public forum, what has taught you most in terms of your path to being a CEO of an investment company in New York? She says, being a young mother and raising 2 children before I started my career is why I am able to do what I do, because that's where I learned how to manage, how to multitask, how to work, how to get on with people. And I don't know what your experience of that is, but I'm betting, as successful as you are, that you kind of look to your life experiences up into including a marriage going in an unscripted direction. I mean, what else do we learn from it? It isn't the big stuff, is it? The official stuff.
No, it's not. No, it's not. And you know what I would say the learning has been, and you don't look, you said you're about to be 70?
Yeah, I'm going to be 70.
You don't look it. I'm not far behind you.
Right.
I've also grown to appreciate.
Well, you know, returning the compliment, you know, but I always hesitate to do that because when you're interviewing people, it's like then it gets too Hollywood, like, you know.
No.
So what I should say is when I'm on TV doing a commentary on MSNBC, they give me makeup. Then I really look good because all these aging spots go away. And here I am at home and I don't put makeup on, so that should tell you something.
Well, I didn't put a lot on, but
no, you're looking good.
No, I was just going to say, you know, I think that the challenges, I'm grateful for them because I know I am a better person, and you don't always know it in the moment.
Yeah.
And there have been dark times. I was recently even interviewed, like, who's one of the most inspiring women, and Mother Teresa would be that person, because she acknowledged even in her life there were 10 dark years,
Right.
where she, and I think those moments do make you stronger. And then I think you're also wise enough to know that there will be more of those twists and turns in the life ahead. But I think there is a gift to being older, and I know my team members hear me say this a lot too. Sometimes there's just no replacement for years on earth to gain the wisdom you gain. And so I am grateful, and every day is a gift, and you just keep moving forward.
Well, there's a little
the best you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's less panic stricken, because most things that come your way, with the exception of a few things that have happened in American politics recently, COVID and a number of other things, you've kind of seen something similar before, and you survived it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that you find out really how strong you are. And I think there's another, I would tell you, I gained another gift, and I think this is really important for women in particular. It is okay to ask, well, all people, it is okay to ask for help. I got better at asking for help in some of those tougher times, because I needed it.
Well, and I think a lot of men have a problem with that. This whole, I was trying to explain to one of my older grandchildren, Ben, who came to visit me recently, who just married Claire, a lovely French girl that he met in college in Europe. And I was saying, well, the source of Jeannie's and my biggest fights earlier in our marriage was the fact that this is pre-cell phone. So we were trying to read maps and get somewhere. And I would refuse to ask for directions, because that's what men do. It's like, no, I must know, where this is. And she would just say, stop and ask somebody. And I actually had to explain to them what I meant by, how could I find the place? Otherwise, it didn't even compute, because they've all been raised on GPS and cell phone.
Yeah.
But it was kind of funny, because it's so typical of men don't ask for help. And then, in small things or big things. So in terms of allyship, I guess, you're talking to men who aren't used to asking anybody for help themselves, let alone you asking them for help. I don't know if that comes into it.
Well, I think I've been doing this work for really the last 5 years. I've been involved with IWL since almost it started. I was a board member for 7 years before I stepped in this role as CEO. It was only supposed to be for 4 months.
Yeah.
5 years later, here I am.
You're off script again.
Yeah, I think what I've learned in working with a lot of men, and the gift of working with a lot of men and women in this allyship work, is that there is so much of an aha moment, and there is so much that's happening every day in the workplace that people are just not aware of. And it's rooted in bias that we all have. It's rooted in systems that have been built with bias. So, changing that requires education and unraveling some of these systems and redesigning them so bias isn't in them. But truly, I think one of the things that I really have learned in working with the men that are interested in advancing on their journeys is allyship. And I think most men do. It's, it's a journey. It's a journey for all of us. But you typically hear a personal reason and first about why this is important to them. They have a daughter, they have a granddaughter, they have a wife that's been in the workplace. So there's oftentimes an aha that comes from someone special in their life that is dealing with this. And then, the enlightened leaders recognize that it's good for business. When you have a more diverse leadership, be it women, race, what have you, the more diversity you get around the table, the better business outcomes. There's a lot of research on that. So it tends to be both of those sorts of things that really start to open. I'm focusing on men here, men as allies, when you're talking about the gender conversation. But that is what helps really, I think, ignite an interest in men to even start the journey.
Yeah, question I have for you in terms of talking to men at a corporate level, in terms of folks who run companies or are important to them. Seems to me there's a change taking place in corporate America right now where, there's that term greenwashing where, oil companies, whomever, had public relations campaigns where they pretend to be one thing, but actually, in fact, aren't doing anything except making clever ads about doing something. But it seems to me that now there's more of an idea that companies, even publicly held companies with responsibility to shareholders, have to have some sort of an internally recognized moral profile of the company. Why are we in business? Who are we serving? What do we represent? The recent events in Ukraine with companies deciding whether to pull out of their involvement in Russia or not has put a lot of people on the spot. What do we represent? Is it all about the bottom line? Surely that impacts the idea of allyship, but also gender equity in so many ways as well. And I just wanted your thoughts on that, the shifting landscape now. I can remember one of the WBC presentations saying that actually, when you look at the numbers, they're not all positive in terms of better numbers for women at higher levels in corporations and all the rest of that. What do you see as a kind of an overall direction now? Is it going in the right direction, or do the numbers actually show us that really there's a lot more to be done, in addition to which maybe they're not all good? How do you see it?
Well, let me start with the picture that comes to mind is really even what that corporate talent pipeline looks like. There are more women still graduating with college degrees and entering the workforce. But if you lean in and McKinsey do the annual Women in the Workplace study, and that's a really important picture for us, and a picture we're trying to change. What happens at every level, and it happens early. Women start to drop off, and it's not because, well, until COVID, I have a comment on that. It's not because they're opting out to go home and raise families, and that's not what's happening. There are just barriers, and again, systems have been built where they're not having the same opportunities. There has been some activity at the top level, like C-suite, but it's still, they call it the broken rung, like going from that to that first manager level is really, really difficult for women, and that affects the rest of them. But there has been some movement at that very top, which has been some intentionality. Thing I'd like to say there is that it would be wonderful if more of those opportunities were for women in C-suite, where it was really more revenue-based sorts of positions and not necessarily administrative HR. I'm not demeaning those in any way, but let's celebrate the candle, don't curse the darkness. We are making progress, but COVID has impacted progress that has been really too slow and even stalled. Now, 1 out of 3 women is even thinking about stepping down or stepping out. I mentioned my own daughter. She just, 2 months ago, we had a very serious conversation. She was dealing with a lot, a third child, and the thought of going back to work, and, probably some extra demands, in caring for that child, 2 toddlers, 3 and a 2-year-old. And she loves her job. And I told her, here I work with a lot of women and men, and it was a gift to work with my own daughter to say, you can do this, and here, please talk to your leadership about how this can work for you. They don't want to lose you. You are good.
Yes.
So have those conversations, and I do think companies today, because COVID has negatively impacted that picture, companies have to be really supportive of helping with the boundaries, because there's even more of a blur between work and life. And I've always believed there's a blend, but there's more of a blur, and we really have to let people deal with the important things in their life, and they'll do even better work. I'm convinced of it.
Is your daughter in a position where she did some of the work from home through COVID, or
she's always been remote. She leads a virtual team and did before COVID. So
you mentioned that, but I didn't know if she was going to an office or not.
No, she's actually with this particular company that she's been with now for 6 years. She's never been in an office. They are virtual. It's headquartered out of the DC area. It's a global cybersecurity, but they have supported remote work long before it became popular with COVID.
Yeah. And of course, now everything's changing, because after the Great Resignation and all the rest of it, which cuts across all genders and
Yeah.
and racial groups and so forth. So a question I have for you, I'll just pause for a minute, let people know you're watching and or listening to In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer. And my guest today is Kim Graham Lee. We're talking about allyship, in other words, men or other people becoming allies of people in the workplace and helping them. This wonderful definition, an ally is someone who speaks well of you or asks questions or helps you when you're not listening, when you're not in the room. And we're having a good discussion about all that. Let me get to kind of a broad philosophical question that I'd love to have your views on. And this is not a loaded question. I really am asking you. It seems to me that, as I look back on my daughter's career, she had her babies young. She was in Finland, by the way, where she had total support, home visits from nurses. Her husband's a Finnish American. Now she's in New York. But at that time of her life, she left NYU, went to Finland, got married young, had babies young. And only when her children were in preschool, did she jump into the career workforce. And then she's had a really wonderful career since then. And she was in Belgium running an office there and so on and so forth. But she looks back and she's just glad that, as luck would have it, she had her kids young enough so that she wasn't at what I would call the sort of most intense point of her striving years, where everything is really, she has to show up and be there. She just felt fortunate that, not that everything's been easy and perfect, but that she sort of went against the trend, which is more in the other direction, as all the tables show. It went from what the age people, pair bonded, got married, had kids. It's all been moving up. It just seems to place a lot of, not only women, but it seems to place a lot of men or young families per se on a kind of a collision course with the most intense portions of their careers and the most intense portion of having little children, if you choose to have a family. I just think it's very weird. And, you couldn't really design a tougher set of choices for people because we love our kids. And there's no reason why we shouldn't love our careers. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. And I'm not fishing for anything here just because I've written on similar subjects. I just really want to know what you think.
I can best speak to my own experience. I think it's, I think in general, we say this, there is no one experience for all. And I actually, for my generation, had my children later. I was in my 30s before I started having children.
Sure.
And I would make a couple comments from my learning, and that was, I put more probably burden on myself, on an expectation of how I needed to perform. I remember I was very fortunate. The CEO of the company, who is still like a second dad to me today, even though I've been gone from that organization 20 years. I remember I came back from work, or back to work, with my first child. And I was really worried I couldn't do the job, or wasn't doing the job like I used to. And I delivered the same results. I just did it a bit differently. And I remember he said to me, "Do you think anyone else sees that?" And I said, "No." He goes, "Then forget it."
Yeah.
I put an expectation on myself of how I had, what it looked like before. So that was an important milestone moment for me. The other thing I would say is that I think women do have to make decisions. In fact, I did something for International Women's Day for an organization, and I fully supported what one of the panelists said. She was probably a little bit younger than me, but she said, sometimes you do have to make choices. I made conscious decisions to change a job because it wasn't the right blend. I wasn't going to do the global travel as my kids were entering into middle school. So that was one of the reasons it became time for me to think about something I'd wanted to do, which was run a company. And it happened. I ran several tech companies, and I had a bit more control over my schedule than a bigger company where I was being told I had to be in Europe or what have you. So I think we all have to make decisions on what works for your life. And I do think there's a greater acceptance. And I think that's been one of the good outcomes of COVID.
Yes.
That there's been a recognition of the importance of life blend and boundaries being set up, and really understanding what people have going on in the backgrounds of their lives.
Yeah, and I
And
think that COVID also sent a lot of men home as well, and
yes,
basically told us all, hey, this is not a woman's problem.
right,
Not everybody must have kids, and not everybody should. But if you're choosing to have
right.
a family, fella, step up and share the childcare, step up and do the dishes. Jeannie and I have a funny thing now. My friend Erin Bagwell, who made this incredible film, we interviewed her here, called Year One, on postpartum depression. She's a great filmmaker, and she invited a friend of hers who was a cameraman in, and just is a fantastic film, by the way. Year One is just unbelievable. But Erin was saying to me, joking the other day, because we were talking about this, that, the sexiest thing a man can do is unload the dishwasher. So Jeannie and I, this is totally off the subject again. Sorry, but I don't know why this conversation keeps going into but anyway, so Jeannie and I have a new thing. The other day, I was unloading the dishwasher, which I do anyway. And I said to her, because she knew what Erin had said, and we both laughed about it. After she went upstairs, I called after her and said, are you mad with desire and passion? Because it's the sexiest thing. So now I don't say I'm in the kitchen doing the dishes, or she doesn't either. We have this thing because of Erin, and we ask each other after we do dishes or clean up or I cook something or whatever, has this unleashed your passion? And that's our code now because of Erin's stuff. Anyway,
I love that.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
That I love that. There is a connection though, and it's so interesting, Frank, you bring that up, because I've been processing some things and given some discussions with women and men in organizations. We're planning a new event for later in the year called the Allyship Summit, and I've been processing what would be really helpful for people. And what does keep coming up is, in this allyship realm, you will hear women say that probably one of the best things that men can do, men in the workplace, make sure you're being an ally at home.
Absolutely.
And again, to your point, COVID did force some of that, but it does start there. And then obviously, a lot of what I'm focused on is helping organizations in their male allyship efforts. But it does start in the home first.
Yeah, and from my point of view, and this is what I've been writing about recently, so it's very much at my fingertips, as you say, but it isn't just that we've gotten it wrong when it comes to women and families as if it's their problem. The sad thing for me, and I genuinely mean that, I feel so sorry for the men I know who have never understood that the basic pleasure of life is not your job title or what you earn. It is the quality of your human relationships. And I put it this way, very simply. The only mirror you have that tells you the truth is what you see written in the face of the people who you care for. And if it's fear and distance, you are a failure. If it is unconditional love and you are the person they'd most rather be with, you're succeeding in life. And I don't care whether you're cleaning toilets or the chairman of a corporation, you are a success. So I think we just need to redefine what success is in the male mind, because really it is tragic to think of someone going through life. And again, you don't all have to be married or have babies or grandchildren, but if the quality of your relationships is poor, it doesn't matter whether you have enough money to build your own rocket fleet. You are a failure, and you are one sad, poor sucker because you've missed the point. So, my thing about writing about doing childcare for grandchildren, doing the housework so my wife can do things that she really wants to do in her design studio. This has nothing to do with having been browbeaten by some feminist into a new way. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that I happen to love Jeannie, and I love these grandchildren, and I get more back from them than I ever give. So I just think that we have to really get out there and say, if we're going to have an idea of allyship that starts at home, let's first discuss the fact that it is absurd that a whole generation of men have been raised on the idea that they are not caregivers, and that somehow this is a women's thing. Bullshit. My son was a Marine. He fought in Afghanistan, and the best sergeants and the best officers that he worked with, and he was a really good person himself, they were caregivers to the Marines. And that's why they could lead. So the weird thing is, you would think the Marines are the most macho, testosterone-driven branch of the military. Actually, it's their ethic of caring for the recruit that makes Marines willing to die for each other. And I know that's very dramatic, but it's the opposite of the idea, well, caregiving is someone else's business. And I just really learned that through him. But my own experience says we need to tell men, listen, the corporate way of life has cheated you. The women are not the only people who have been cheated because of the way they've been treated. You have been cheated because you've been told that it's all business. It isn't. You're the guy that ought to be taking the paternity leave and insisting on it and opening the way for women so that you give them some cover. But listen, idiot, that would be the best year of your life if you could swing it. And you'd wish you could keep going. And by the way, if you get sent home by COVID and you have to spend a year at home with those toddlers, you're going to want to keep working from home, as many, many men have. So I don't think this is a women's thing. I think it's a human thing, and that women have been hurt by it because of this stupid idea that men aren't caregivers.
Well, and it's been decades of systems that have been built.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. And you know what needs to happen today, and what is happening, and again, you know, one of the, I guess, gifts of COVID is that we have to lead differently, and we have to lead with much more empathy. I know I'm here for my IWL hat, which is my paid job, but for a number of years I've been involved in an organization and started a chapter here in Indianapolis of something called Conscious Capitalism. And words like love and caring, those are words you can use in business. And it really is about leaders developing more of those muscles that have been maybe considered more feminine characteristics, you know, team, collaboration, love, caring, empathy. We need that today. You know, it's not that one is wrong. We need both, and we all need to develop those muscles. And this is an opportunity for men to develop more of those muscles. They maybe have always wanted to flex a bit, but systems haven't been built to support that either. So, you know, it's a lot of things that have to unravel, and we need to redesign, and awareness and education are an important part of it. And that's where this research study comes into play too. Yeah.
And you know what's so ironic is the modern science is here now, as is the anthropology to back it. You know, the weird thing is about a lot of views of male and female roles is that people talk about male roles that are kind of testosterone driven, domination, and then female roles as caregiving and love and so forth, as if somehow these are their traditional roles. Actually, if you do a little evolutionary reading and psychology, biology, anthropology, what you run into very quickly is there's been a huge shift in science, and this has nothing to do with politically correct anything. This is just hard science. And that is the survival of the fittest paradigm has been replaced in the last 30 years by a deeper understanding that it's always been the survival of the friendliest.
Oh, I love that. The survival of the friendliest.
That is the new catchphrase. And we're only here, you and me, you know, Kim and Frank are only talking today because somebody in our ancestral background, whether it was 10,000 years ago or 80,000 years ago or 150,000 years ago or 1,000,000 years ago on the plains of Africa, cared for someone. Otherwise, we're dead. And caring has always been the thing. And the funny thing is, I'm reading this incredible book by Elizabeth Marshall Thomas called The Old Way. She's this incredible author. I wrote a book called Growing Old by her, and she's written this wonderful book of anthropology that she wrote many years ago on the African savannah in Namibia, and the people who lived there in an unbroken line back 80,000 years. I mean, that's a long time to be in one place. And she studied them in the 1950s with her dad, who, by the way, founded Raytheon, very interesting family, the Thomas Marshall family, incredible. Reminds me of you. The way she talked about her fathers in the book, by the way, is the same fondness you have for your dad. And it's lovely. But she was talking about the fact that, you know, when you go back into the hunter-gatherer societies, the male and female roles are equal. They're different, but they are totally equal. And the idea that traditionally men are in charge and women are this sort of subservient, caring little thing on the side is total bullshit. It's not borne out by
Hmm.
evolution. It's not borne out by evolutionary society. It's not borne out by hunter-gatherer societies. The survival of the friendliest is. So if you fast forward to our own period of history, this idea that somehow women asking for this is a new thing is the exact opposite. The new weird thing is this idea of gender roles based on something other than mutual caregiving. That's the weird new part. And that is a modern phenomena that goes back to the Industrial Revolution. It's not, this is the way it always was.
Right. No, I've heard, no, thank you. That's very interesting.
Survival of the
Survival
friendliest.
of the friendliest. I love that.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. And you're right. A lot of the systems and where we are today is the industrial workplace that we had before, but that's not where we are today. So
Sure.
yeah, it's time. And again, COVID helped move a few things forward.
Yeah, and the
And a
thing
few
is,
things backwards.
well, and I think that, Kim, as you look at what you're doing, I mean, this sounds very strange, but evolution is on your side, because in the end, we all want joy and happiness. And I think as men discover that a true partnership, whether it's in the home with a wife or a partner, a spouse, or whether it's in the workplace with being a caregiving ally, is actually where you will find joy. I mean, all the studies have been done. You buy a new Mercedes, the joy lasts for about 2 weeks. You pay somebody's bill at the supermarket because they can't afford the shopping cart full of food or diapers. You can call on that a year later when you're depressed, and it will get you out of that depression. And all the studies show that. So the giving and the sharing. So, I just think evolution is on your side.
Great. No, I'm going to have to look deeper into that. Thank you. Well, you said something I wanted to comment on about the caregiving. I know one thing that's really important in this allyship work. It is important to care about others. And I know when you use the word caregiving, that's how you're using it.
Yes,
I know
I am.
one of the pitfalls that can happen in this allyship arena in the workplace is that women do not want to be saved. This isn't what this is about. Is they just want the same opportunities. And so men leveraging their privilege and their influence, and they still hold most of the positions of power, they just want, they want those same opportunities and really to be seen and to be heard too. Because sometimes, again, women and other groups, other underrepresented and marginalized groups aren't heard and seen around the table, and they're interrupted more and blah, blah, blah. So I'm kind of moving to a little bit of a different topic, that it's not about saving women. It's about really advocating for them. But I do love your choice of the word care. If you care about people, if you understand what's going on in their lives, I am absolutely convinced, and in the first 20 years of my career, this is what I measured. I was a marketing researcher. They will be even more productive, and you will have better business outcomes if your people know you truly care about them.
Yeah, by the way, just mention for people listening that we're going to put a link to everything that you're talking about, and Kim is going to give us a list of things she would like you all to look into. And this whole idea, the action benchmark study, is one of the things we want to key into, because I think people will be very, very interested. When I talk about caregiving, I'm not talking about it in the narrow sense of childcare. I'm talking about it as in how you see the person at the checkout counter in the grocery store, at the supermarket. It's how you relate to anybody, the harassed flight attendant. Everybody else is, bitching, but you take a minute to ask her how she's doing. I mean, this is just a way of life that seems to me to go hand in glove with what we're talking about here. The reason for allyship is not, I think, to give women a break. It's to treat everybody around you as a human being in a survival of the friendliest.
I love that
thing, because that's, and speaking personally as a 70-year-old man, father and grandfather, it's where I have voted in this sense, and nothing to do, believe me, perfectly selfishly. It's why I've had a woman primary care doctor I've had for 25 years. It's why my lawyer is a woman. It's why the person who does my estate planning is a woman. It's why Jeannie does all the business in our home, because she's so much better at everything from pensions to all the rest of it. And it's a recognition that the skill that women have is a skill that works across the board, because women do take the time to see you more, I feel, in this culture of ours, as a whole person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's who I want to work with. I don't want to work with the smart ass, guy teaching at Harvard Med who's got 4 minutes for me and, and moves me on. My doctor will take half an hour and talk to me if I need her to. And that's who you want to work with. And that's why I think women are so much better at all of this than men are. I don't think it's an even, like, I see it, I flip it completely. I don't think it's a question of giving opportunity. I think it's a question of seeing who's actually better at this. And I think most of the time women are. That's really my view.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you've had that experience. And that's certainly what we're trying to put a spotlight on. And, when we're talking about men and women here, and, and my organization is focused on accelerating the advancement of women, especially changing that corporate talent pipeline picture. But I like to always add 2 things to our why, and that is we have to invite men into this work and help them and support them, because women talking to women will never change it, and so men are an important part of our work. And the other thing to say, Frank, is that this gender discussion is the gateway to the other equally important conversations, whether it be race, sexual orientation, where people can feel on the outside. And I've even had my own aha moments in my role here of how I, as a white woman, have more privilege than a woman of color. So this, we're all on a leadership journey. We're all on a journey to become the best version of ourselves while we're here on Earth. And it's incredibly gratifying work. And we have to be intentional and work on it every day. And there is no silver bullet. It's going to take a lot of combined effort, which is why it's great to be part of something like the WBC partnership or collaborative organization. And I'm so excited I've met you here too.
Talk about the action benchmark study a little bit here. Let's cut to the chase and talk about what needs changing, what you're finding, and what's encouraging and what's discouraging. What are you learning by doing this?
Well, we haven't gotten the results yet. So the first thing is I would really want to invite people. I was a marketing researcher for 20 years and really saw an opportunity to put some metrics. And this is our first benchmark study, but we're going to be finding out from the people that participate in this study, and these are men and women. So one of the first things we're going to do is take a look at, do men have a different picture than women, and in the same organization even. So, and then we'll have an overall picture of what's happening in corporate America. But we're going to be looking at things, asking them about you've heard the term, I'm sure, microaggressions. What are the things that are happening every day that can make people feel less than? They're little things that are often unintentional. So we're going to be asking about different kinds of microaggressions. Are women doing the office work? Are you watching them being interrupted? Has this happened to you if you're the woman completing the survey? We're going to be asking about, allyship actions. This ally is a verb, not just a noun, and it's about action. And that's why even the title of the research is the state of allyship in action, because a lot of people will say they're an ally, but they're not really taking action to be an ally. So we have, a battery of questions related to, are you seeing these sorts of things happening, these actions being taken in the organization? There's a continuum of allyship. Allyship is a journey. Life's a journey. Allyship is a journey. And we're going to find out what people think of the different layers of leadership and where they are on that continuum. Are they ambivalent? That, I don't think this really matters a whole lot, and there's a couple levels in between, or are they really the advocate in the room when that person isn't there? So there's a continuum. So we'll get to assess at least where these organizations are viewed. I'm really interested in capturing stories. Last set of questions relates to even stories. What have you seen happen where someone really was an advocate for a woman, and what's still happening that that isn't allyship, and women are still being devalued. It's those stories that can be really powerful too. Because I will tell you this, when men in the workshops I've been doing for a number of years, they're really, when it really is pointed out that this is what's happening, they really are shocked. And
Mm.
it's like, oh my gosh, I do need to be more aware of that. So it's so much of it is education, and so much of it is
Speaking of which,
recognizing.
give
I'm
us
sorry,
some
go
of
ahead.
the specifics of what is happening, because I know what you're talking about. I want to make sure everybody who's listening and watching this knows. Give some specifics, maybe from your own story or other people, of the kind of things, small or large, that add up to a lack of opportunity, in the sense that there wasn't anybody there to take your part.
Well, one global, one overarching thing that does happen is that it's tied to a bias. It's this prove it and prove it again performance bias, where women literally have to demonstrate that they've done something before they'll even be considered to be hired or that promotion. Men, and it's been researched, it's based on potential. So there's a higher bar out of the gate that women have to overcome or show that they can jump over to go to that next level to be hired. And one of the challenges is, in these systems that have been built around it, women won't apply for that job unless they feel they can check all the boxes. So that's a very high level, that there's a different set of criteria in some ways based on proven performance versus potential. And then there's those everyday things of microaggressions. Women are interrupted 3.5 times more than men in meetings. A woman can have an idea and she'll share it, but it isn't heard until the gentleman says the very same thing. And again, these are all tied to known and researched biases that do exist in the workplace as it relates to biases against women. So we're doing office work. If the woman is always taking the notes in the meeting, it's gone on a long time, and it's a lot of little things that add up, and it can be death by 1,000 paper cuts. So, and again, we're focused on gender, but this happens to other groups that feel less than and on the outside too.
Would you think that would be exacerbated in the case of, say, a Black woman in the same job as a white woman? Would be even? Oh
yeah, women of color absolutely have even greater challenges. And as I've said before, that was even a bit of my own learning, is how much privilege I even have as a white woman compared to a woman of color. So we all have an opportunity to be an ally.
Yeah. Do you think there's something about the way men and women work together that perpetuates these blind spots, in the sense that the women are not used to making the demand to be heard and not be interrupted, for instance, to take that, or whatever it may be? Or is it just cultural bias to the point where no one would really see it until it's pointed out?
This all starts when we're young. I'm sure you're familiar with unconscious bias, and our brain has to form shortcuts. So we form these shortcuts, they become biases because we just can't process everything that we're being hit with. What is it, 11 million bits of information every second? We can only be aware of 40, so we have to form these shortcuts. So that's where it starts, is being aware of the bias that we all have. And I was in a discussion earlier today, and there has been some conditioning that women are raised, or little girls are raised to be perfect. So we aren't going to speak up unless we feel we've got the PhD answer to that question. I mean, that goes back to the book in the 80s that I remember reading. What women are from,
Venus,
or men are from Mars and women are from Venus.
Yeah.
That still exists 40 years later. So it's building awareness, and none of this makes any of us bad. We're all human, and we're all doing the best we can. But we can do better when we really learn what's happening and understand even the roots of, again, even of unconscious bias contributing to this.
Well, before we wrap this up, I have a very specific question for you, and I don't want you to have any time constraint on this. I really want the fullest answer you feel like giving. If there are men watching this in leadership positions in companies, or just somebody who wants to be a good partner at home, what are the things in the best of all worlds, if you wanted to gift every man with, here are the 3 things, 7 things, 8 things you can look out for in really becoming the ally of the woman or the minority person you're working with? Interrupting is one. You talked about that. Please reiterate that. We all need to hear that a lot. Here's a funny way to put it. What are the good manners we could all learn to take care of the human beings around us better and become everyone's ally, especially the people who don't have someone speaking up for them? Give me 5 things or 10 things to look out for as a man.
I'll start with one overarching one.
Mm.
And that is sit down with someone that isn't like you and ask them about their experience and go deeper. Try to really understand what their experience, let's talk about the workplace. Ask them what their experience is like in the organization and continue to go deeper on that. Learn about it and just listen. Listen. I think that is the first thing that people can do. Building on that, one of the most common things that does happen are even meeting dynamics. I'm getting a little tactical here. Just tally the number of times you hear a woman speak up in a meeting versus a man. Watch for how many times a woman is interrupted. Just do a hand tally. You'll start to see these things play out. And again, I didn't even know. I had been working 35 years before I even became aware of this. And I was president and CEO of some organizations. And even in that role were some of my worst experiences, So, I gave you a high level answer that I learned from somebody else's life journey and recognize what privilege you have over someone else and how can you really help lift them up. And then again, watch for those things in every day where often it's unintentional, but you're making someone feel less than. And learn how to call. Here's one, I think this would be an important point too, Frank. We work with men on how to help call out when things could be handled better. And oftentimes the best way a man can call out behavior is to call a woman in. To call her in, ask for her opinion, in a meeting. Make sure that when you're leading meetings, that you're really trying to hear from everybody. So I've given you at least 3 there.
Add a couple more. Yeah, because these are great. I mean, this is all stuff for me personally and for other people. And I know that, we need to hear this.
I think one thing too, and I am not a diversity and inclusion expert, but I have learned a lot in this role. And I think we do have to, and now I'm probably speaking to leaders of organizations, we do have to put metrics to this. Let's look at the hiring slates and who's interviewing people. And just having one isn't enough. That might be different. They really do say just having one woman isn't enough. You need at least maybe 3 out of 10, and that would be for any underrepresented group. So we need to have better metrics in organizations, starting, with the top leadership, really looking at this and not just hiring, but looking at promotion and who's leaving that we really don't want to leave. And, what is a high percentage of women leaving and why. So I do think there need to be more metrics and accountability around this, and that starts at the top. So that would be another thought. I know I'm kind of jumping around here. And I do believe there needs to be much more training. I mean, I think the Lean In McKinsey report said, the most recent one, that only 14% of employees have had any kind of training as it relates to allyship. So I think there's been more done in unconscious bias, and even there, I think there can be more that's done. But I think we really need to be intentional about training within organizations on allyship and what that looks like and what it doesn't look like.
Yeah, when you say doesn't look like, just be a little more specific.
Well, that the behaviors, first of all, it's not just saying that you're an ally. That's one of the things in working with the men and women in the organizations I've worked with. It's really hard for women to hear men talk about themselves as allies. That's not how you earn that. You earn that by the actions that you show. So it isn't just I talked about the importance of training. It isn't just going to that training, but it's taking that training and your behavior starts to change. That's what, a woman, and again, I'm referring to the gender allyship here. That's what a woman wants to see, that behaviors are actually changing. And it's going to take time.
I love this suggestion of just sort of asking someone for their opinion in a meeting, as simple as that, and
just call them in.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So we'd like to encourage our listeners and viewers to take the allyship study linked everywhere to this conversation appears. Does that suit you, Kim? Is this helpful?
Yes, please. Go to our website, iwlfoundation.org. There is information.
We're putting
it will be there. Thank you. And one thing important to note is that we really are reaching out. The WBC and IWL are reaching out to our corporate community. And we are really encouraging companies to conduct a representative sample of at least 150 men, 50 women, all levels of the organization. And we're happy to share your specific results with you. Not only will you contribute it to the overall aggregate picture, but you'll have an opportunity to see your own results. And I think that should be something very interesting to companies. There's no charge for this. In fact, there's a little bit of an incentive that any company that does that will receive automatically a complimentary seat to our annual Women's Leadership Conference, where we will be presenting the results. WBBC will be on stage with me on June 9th presenting those results. And then this is also leading up to a brand new event that we're going to be hosting in the fall, September 14th, tied to it's called the All-In Allyship Summit, where we're really going to do a deep dive on allyship and provide some additional programming. So there's some extra incentives there too, to take less than 10 minutes of your time to share with us, both men and women, what your experiences are as it relates to allyship in your organization.
Well, please do, everyone. And as I mentioned, we're going to put links to all of this and try to make it very easy, one click away kind of stuff from what Kim's doing. We've been talking about the WBC a lot. Let me just explain also, as I did at the beginning, the WBC is the Women's Business Collaborative. Our friend Edie Fraser is instrumental in that. And other friend, Jose Zylstra, who introduced us to that. I'm on the advisory committee. Let me note that I just think that, we talk about a lot of subjects, but that allyship is probably, as far as I can tell, as someone who has talked to quite a few women about these issues on this program, but in other venues as well, there's nothing more important. So if you are someone that feels that women, whether you're a woman or a man or gay or straight or whomever, but you think that people ought to be given a voice, this is the way to do it. So take the study, help Kim, and get on board with this. My name is Frank Schaeffer. This is In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer. I'm the author of a lot of books, and a recent one is Fall in Love, Have Children, Stay Put, Save the Planet, Be Happy. And I've been happy to learn, by the way, that book is being adopted by many women and several women's groups as something that really makes the case for men to become the allies of women, starting at home, and the division of labor at home with childcare and all the rest of it. So I'm pleased that book has had that result. So Kim, can I thank you for being part of this and urge everyone to get in touch with you? It's been a really lovely conversation.
Thank you, Frank. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, and listen, I have two favors to ask you. One, if you're having something in September, please arrange with my producer, Ernie, to come back and do another conversation so that we can, nearer that time, get people on board with that event, and also just what you're doing, kind of catch up and see how this came about. So I don't know, when's the allyship? When are you going to get these results in and be able to say, hey, here's some things we learned?
The actual results will be at our annual Women's Leadership Conference, which, by the way, about 20% of our attendees are men. That's June 8th and June 9th. It is a virtual half-day conference those 2 days. We are introducing some in-person connection the following week. And then we are also going to be hosting for the first time ever the Allyship Summit, the All-In Allyship Summit, on September 14th, and that will be a virtual event. And we
can we
have an
link
exciting.
to that? Can we link to
Pardon?
that? So are people who are watching you now who want to follow that going to be able to find out how to link to that and watch some of that?
That it's a paid for ticket, so you'll go to our website and get information. But no, would love to come back with Edie or whomever from the WBC and share the results of the survey as part of this podcast. And then,
yes,
then the real work comes, and that is, now what are we doing based on this information? And this is just the first. This is a benchmark study, and we certainly envision expanding every year. So
well, I'd like to do a
and thank you for your help.
Yeah, I want to do a follow-up with you though once those results are in. Let's do another conversation if you're willing to go through this again sometime.
Absolutely.
So that Ernie can book you, and we will talk all about what you learned, because I just think this is so important and good. So, Kim,
thank you.
Thank you for your time, and we're going to now go away, but we will be following this with great interest, and please do share the results with us here, and also make sure Ernie has all the links. And Ernie, thank you for producing this segment again, and Kim for being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you both, and thank you for being an ally, Frank.
Hey,
at home
try.
And beyond.
But I'm sobered by what you say is don't talk about it, do it. So it's like, well, wait a minute, what am I? I'm trying.
We'll bring Jeannie on, okay?
Well, then she can tell you whether I'm an ally or not.
I'm sure she'll tell me that you are.
Yeah,
it's such a pleasure.
I'm trying. Thanks a lot, Kim.
All right, thank you.
Bye.